Hi everybody. Well, here we go again. I had high hopes that I would be able to give you a video that'd be a little more interactive, but I'm still working on that. So we're going back to the same old for a little while longer, and just do the recorded notes. So we're going to begin with Chapter 9, but I'm also going to do Chapter 10 on the same video rather than doing separates. So all you'll need to do is just pause when Chapter 9 is over and then pull up Chapter 10. If you don't want to do it the same day, that's fine. You can always, just run the video forward to find Chapter 10 and then move forward. So you guys know how to do this. I really don't need to tell you. But anyways, just felt like I needed to just in case. Okay, so let's get started with Chapter 9. It's not a terribly long chapter, but it is a chapter that refers to crimes against the person. So we're looking directly at what can happen to you as an individual, or, God forbid, you are the person doing the act. So let's get started. All right. Here we go. We're going to start first with a quote. You don't need to write that down unless you really want to. I think it's a really timely quote. It's by a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Warden E. Burger. He says, "Crime and the fear of crime have permeated the fabric of American life," meaning that the idea of crime, the fact that it happens, the fact that we are, in most cases, are all victims to some sort of crime, has become an important part of our American life. And all you have to do is look on TV and see just how many television shows focus on cops, Cop PD, or Live PD, or let's see, Chicago PD, and, well, all of the other ones that are out there. So it has become a really a part of our life in so many different ways, from the actual being a victim to being interested in watching those things that happen. Okay, so to start off with, crimes against the person are always considered serious crimes, and defendant found guilty may receive a harsh sentence. So this is important to understand that crimes against persons are considered a priority as far as cops are concerned. The law also protects defendants from overly harsh penalties by defining various levels of these crimes and by considering the circumstances of each offense. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to focus in on some specific crimes, identify what are the things that make it a crime, and how some things are more serious than others. So let's move forward. Let's start off with, obviously, one of the worst, a homicide. This can be either criminal or non-criminal. We're going to focus in on criminal first, but this is the killing of one human being by another. Okay, I'm not saying whose fault it is or anything at this moment. A homicide is just strictly the killing of one human being by another. Now, if we were looking at criminal, excuse me, then criminal, this is committed with the intent or a plan. Okay, so it's committed with intent or a plan. Like you intended to do harm. And you made a plan to accomplish that. And if a person's reckless actions without regard to human life result in killing of another person. So it's also, like, for example, if you are going 100 miles an hour down a road, you have a passenger in your car and you have an accident, and you survive, the other person doesn't, this is a homicide. You have to understand that that is not, you didn't mean to do it. Your reckless action placed that person in jeopardy, and therefore you are responsible for the killing of that person. And so that's a homicide. Now, criminal homicide is murder, killing done with malice. Okay, first-degree murder. This is killing that is done premeditated, means you thought about it beforehand, deliberate and done with malice. Now let's look at this idea of premeditated ahead of time here. Premeditated is something that, as I said, you think about it ahead of time. But here's the thing, you don't have to spend hours thinking about something for it to be premeditated. You can think about it for a second or two, and it is premeditated. That is, and let me give you an example of this, and it's a rather personal example because it relates to a family member. And I did get permission from that family member to talk about this. So, a few years back, actually 7 years now, or several years now, my sister-in-law's brother moved to California. He did so because his family, his wife had moved back. She was originally from California, wanted to live in California. She moved back, and then he moved back to be with her. He was traveling to see her and traveled through a little town in California. And as he was driving through the little town, a woman ran out in front of him, and he hit her. And then out from behind several cars ran a man who was chasing this woman. She was supposedly his girlfriend, and they'd been having an argument. When he saw that she had been hit by this car, he ran up to the car, reached inside, and began to beat my sister-in-law's brother up. And in the process, killed him. Hit him so hard that, in fact, within the first punch or two, hit him so far that broke his neck and killed him. So, when this man was charged with my sister-in-law's brother's murder, the idea was whether it was premeditated or not. And the prosecutor told my sister-in-law that it only needed to be a second or two for something to be premeditated. And he was charged with first-degree murder. Now, to finish the story, he actually pled guilty to second-degree murder. It was a plea bargain, so that second-degree murder allows him to be, instead of possibly being considered for capital murder, a death penalty. Second-degree murder does not include the death penalty. So you understand that premeditation can be just a moment. All right, I think the rest, though, is very straightforward, deliberate, you mean to do it, and it was done with the intent of malice. And malice, of course, is the idea that you have intent to do harm. Okay? So, again, this is killing done with malice. All right, felony murder, killing that takes place during the commission of certain felonies. So if, for example, you are you've decided, you and maybe some others have decided to commit bank robbery. You go into the bank, you are armed, and in the process, somebody makes a move, you end up killing that person. Maybe not intending to, it certainly wasn't premeditated, but you ended up killing that person during a felony, and that during the commitment of a felony, and that means then that you can be charged with something called felony murder. Okay. The next thing then is second-degree murder. This is killing done with malice. Again, you intended to kill, but you did not, there was no premeditation. And so, and this is the idea. You've got the killing occurred, but there was no premeditation, no thought ahead of time that you were going to do this. It could be where you have run someone down without thinking about it, but you intended to harm that person. You had the malice, you had the hate, and in the process you killed them. You may not have intended to kill that, but that's what happened. Okay, voluntary manslaughter. This is killing that would otherwise be murder, but that occurs after the victim has done something to the killer that would cause a reasonable person to lose self-control or act harshly. I think probably one of the best examples of this would be is if you found out that someone harmed maybe someone who loved you, and in fact it was a very heinous thing. And probably the best example that I could give you would be Carl Lee in the movie A Time to Kill. This would have been the issue. He was reasonably upset over his daughter's rape, and as a result, killed. He lost his self-control. He acted rashly. This could have been voluntary manslaughter. Okay. They didn't consider that in the movie, but it could have been. All right. Moving on. Then there's also something called involuntary manslaughter. This is killing in which there was no intent to kill at all, completely unintentional. For example, if by chance someone stepped off a curb and as you were driving by and you hit them, it's important to remember you are always to be in total control of that car. So if that person walked in front of you, you're still responsible, and so, but it would most likely be something called involuntary manslaughter, which there was no intent at all. It was completely unintentional for you to harm that person. Now, something else is called another homicide. It's called negligent homicide. This is causing death through criminal negligence. So we define negligence here as the failure to exercise a reasonable or only amount of care in a situation, thereby causing harm to somebody else. For example, if you were at a bonfire or were starting a fire and you threw gas on it because it just wasn't starting correctly, that's a very negligent act, and in the process somebody might have caught fire and gotten and killed as a result of that. That would be considered something like a negligent homicide. Okay, one thing I want to make sure, if you guys have questions about what I'm describing or if you're unsure about something, please email me. I hope to eventually be able to maybe do some live work, but at this moment we're stuck with what we've got, so please email me, and then I'll try to address those in a video. Okay, now we're going to talk about non-criminal homicide. This is when it's excusable or justified, which seems hard to fathom, but in fact that's generally true. It's generally not a subject for criminal charges. An example would be suicide, deliberate taking of one's own life, and it was at one time considered a crime. It is no longer. In addition, one thing that's missing, and I didn't realize it was, is a non-criminal homicide would also include self-defense. If you are defending yourself against an attack, and it can be shown that in fact you were completely innocent of the attack, then that would also be a non-criminal homicide. Didn't realize that was missing. All right, so some other crimes against persons would include assault. Now, assault is any attempt to carry out or physical attack upon another person. And this is, it's just pretty straightforward. It's an attempt or a threat to carry out a physical attack on another person. Now, assault and battery are very closely related. Battery is any unlawful physical contact, pay attention to that, physical contact by one person upon another person without consent. Actual injury is not necessary. The only requirement is that a person must have intended to do bodily harm. Okay, so today there is not much difference in the law between the uses of the words assault and battery. So we often hear it, but there is a difference, and It is an attempt, assault is an attempt or threat to carry out physical attack upon another person. And then battery is the unlawful physical contact inflicted by one person upon another without that person's consent. So actual, and this is important, that this line, and you might want to highlight this line right here. Actual injury is not necessary. The only requirement is that a person must have intended to do bodily harm. Okay, so again, there's the rest. All right, there are different classifications for assault and battery. These classifications are based on the intent to rob versus intent to harm. Aggravated battery is often defined by the harm that's inflicted. Assault is often the result from arguments between people who know each other, and these arguments can lead to violence and are often stimulated by alcohol or jealousy. So if something is more serious, it's usually an aggravated. There's intent to harm is the aggravated part of it. If you're just intending to rob without causing any kind of harm, then there's a little bit of difference. However, like it says, in today's world, these two are closely associated. All right. Included in assault and battery is also stalking. This is when a person repeatedly follows or harasses another person and makes threats, causing the victim to fear death or bodily injury. This is a really scary thing in today's world. There are a lot of people out there that think it's okay to bully or to pursue people and harass them, and this has become more and more in our world today a more serious crime. And it does, at one time, it didn't really there was seldom ever it was jailed. But in today's world, people who are stalkers and convicted can receive some serious jail time. Also, sexual assault is included in assault and battery. This is a specific kind of assault that can include rape or attempted rape. Sexual assault includes a wide range of victimization, from verbal threats of a sexual nature to unwanted sexual contact. So if you have been a victim of somebody smacking your rear end or pinching where they shouldn't be touching, this is a form of sexual assault. And you guys need to really pay attention to this. I think sometimes there is this belief that it's okay to do this to people your own age. Well, guess what, guys? It's not. And you're going to find that if you are accused of this, you may be in some serious trouble. So think twice before you behave in a manner that is really victimizing others. All right, a separate crime, though, is rape. This is sexual intercourse without consent. This is an aggravated form of rape. Occurs when a perpetrator uses a weapon or some other form of force. No consent if victim is unconscious or mentally incompetent, or if drugs or alcohol impair the victim's judgment. Now let's make sure you're clear on this. There is no way to say the person said I could if they're unconscious or mentally incompetent, or if drugs and alcohol impair the victim's judgment. It is still rape. Okay, I'll tell you of a story. This happened when I was still living in Texas. In fact, it occurred in Texas. A woman was attacked by a man, and she begged him to wear a condom. And he complied. He wore a condom and then raped her. Then he was arrested, and he claimed that because he wore that condom, because she asked him to and he complied, then she consented to the sexual contact or the rape. The good news is the jury did not accept that as an excuse, and he in fact was jailed, and thank goodness for that. Okay, in addition, statutory rape. This is intercourse between an adult and a minor. Lack of consent is not an element of this crime. This crime is based on the notion that a minor is incapable of giving legal consent. Guys, you need to pay attention to this. This is something that can get people into serious trouble by simply not paying attention to the age of the person you are having sexual relations with. This is an important factor. A male can be prosecuted even if the minor female has lied about her age. Another thing that you got to pay very close attention to. And it's important also because it seems in today's world there are the issue of ladies. This lying about your age can get you into some serious trouble. So let's pay very close attention as to who you are spending time with. Okay. All right, that finishes chapter 9. I'm going to give a few seconds here for you to pause, and then I'm going to get started on chapter 10 here in just a moment. Okay, let's get started again. Chapter 10. Now this is crimes against property, and this is also serious, but it doesn't hold the weight necessarily that crimes against person would. Of course, we all feel very attached to our property. We don't want to see anybody messing with our stuff, but we need to be careful about how we handle crimes against property. All right, crimes against property. There are two groups. The first is crimes in which property is destroyed. All right. Then the second group is crimes in which property is stolen against the will of the owner. Okay. So begs a kind of a question here. How do you protect your property against property crime? That's hard to do, especially if your property is sitting outside. I know of people who have had their stuff stolen off of their patios and their decks. I've known of people whose cars have been stolen just because they've been sitting outside, and people stealing people's flamingos or garden gnomes. All of this is property being stolen. How do you prevent it? Don't put stuff outside, I guess. But there you do. You stand a chance of your property being stolen. You can also do things, though, to protect your property, in that you can do things like have for your home, you can have where you have computer. I'm trying to think of a word, and I'm so sorry, it's escaped me. Where a computer is protecting the interior of your house. ADP is an example of a company that does that. There's all kinds of ways now to protect your property and the things that you own. So let's get into this. What are these crimes? All right, the first one is arson. This is the willful and malicious burning of a person's property. It's also burning of property with the intent to defraud an insurance company, and this is a separate crime. So, first of all, willful and malicious burning of a person's property. You don't like somebody, so you set their house on fire. You don't like somebody, so you set their car on fire. That is arson, and you can get into pretty serious trouble for arson. Now, the burning of property with the intent to defraud an insurance company is often done by the person who owns the property, and they, in an effort to try to get the money then from the insurance company that that particular property was insured for. And that can come in a lot of forms. I'm showing you a picture here of a house burning. And people have been known to burn their house in an effort to get the money. Okay, so moving on. Vandalism. This is the malicious mischief. It's also known as malicious mischief. This is a willful destruction of or damage to the property of another. This can be either a felony or a misdemeanor. As you can see, the picture that we're looking at here happens to be a school where somebody came in with paint and basically destroyed those blackboards. And we've all seen pictures of this in the news where somebody has destroyed the property, and as a result, they can be charged with vandalism. Okay. Larceny, then, is the unlawful taking and carrying away a property of another person with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of it. And you can see a picture here. Somebody is stealing this person's billfold or wallet. And there's two classes. It can be grand, which is $100 or more, or petty, which is $100 or less. So oftentimes you'll hear, okay, petty larceny or grand larceny. This would be, as again, unlawful taking and carrying away a property of another person with intent to permanently deprive the owner of it. Now, larceny can include shoplifting, and this is a form of larceny. Again, depending on the amount that you take, it could be grand or petty. The difference here also is you could be talking about a felony as opposed to a misdemeanor. Let's say you decide to steal a candy bar. Well, obviously that's petty larceny. You are most likely not going to go to jail for that. But it is still a crime, and depending on how vigorous a store might be as to whether you might end up in jail or not. Come on. There we go. Now, the next one is known as embezzlement. And this is the unlawful taking of property by someone who it is entrusted to. Often you hear about this as somebody's embezzled money. They've been entrusted with money. And people, sometimes people who work for banks, CPAs. This is usually people, as I said, who work with somebody else's money. Usually, not always, but usually. And this can mean, in some cases, huge amounts of money. Some states have combined the crime of embezzlement, larceny, and obtaining property by false pretense into the crime of theft. But this is a big deal, can be a very big deal, and people have, because of embezzlement by others, have lost their life savings, have lost nearly everything as a result of somebody else taking their goods. So, very serious crime. Robbery is somewhat related in that, again, it's the unlawful taking of property from a person's immediate possession, but by force or intimidation. The two harms here we're talking about is theft of property and the actual potential harm to the victim. So robbery usually means that there is some sort of force and intimidation involved. Well, not usually, but it is force and intimidation. The picture you see here is an example of probably a bank robbery of some sort. Robbery is almost always a felony. Armed robbery is the theft committed with a gun or some other weapon. So, very serious. Now, extortion can also be known as blackmail, and we've all probably heard that. This is the use of threats to obtain the property of another, including the threat to do future physical harm, destroy property, or injure someone's character or reputation. Extortion can come in a lot of different forms. This could be something where somebody simply says, if you don't do this, then I will do this to you. An example would be, excuse me, sorry, I had to stop there, I had a cough. Okay, so let's go back to extortion. So this is also known as blackmail, and it's the use of threats to obtain the property of another, including the threat to do future harm, physical harm, destroy property, or injure someone's character or reputation. Now, you got this is something that people can really destroy another person through their threats. And it is somewhat difficult to prove, but it certainly is something that does happen and is something that you hope that you're never a victim of. All right, burglary. Burglary was originally defined as breaking and entering a dwelling of another person during the night with the intent to commit a felony therein or within that property, to steal or to take things. And so it's that breaking and entering. Now, the thing about it was originally that it had to happen at night. Now, in today's world, that's no longer necessary. It includes the unauthorized entry into a structure with the intent to commit a crime, regardless of the time of day. Doesn't matter. Does not matter what time of day. So if you break into somebody's house and take their stuff, this is burglary. Okay? In most cases, the person is often not in the house when people break in, although it's possible for the person to be there, but oftentimes burglary is not committed then. Okay. Now, forgery. Forgery is a person makes or alters a writing or document with the intent to defraud. This is somebody like stealing checks and writing a check, or stealing your credit card and signing for it. You are trying to defraud. It could be that you try to steal somebody's property by claiming you as the owner of forgery, trying to use your signature as a way, or trying to write their signature in your own handwriting. You're altering or trying to defraud someone from their property. Uttering is someone offers a document as genuine when they know it's fake. So it might be that somebody would have claimed that they own my home by producing a document that shows that they own the home, when in fact it's mine, but their document is fake. And so therefore that's known as uttering. So the receiving of stolen property is if you receive or buy property that you know or have reason to believe is stolen. Knowledge that that property is stolen may be implied by the circumstances. Let me explain what that means. So let's say somebody offers you an Xbox, for a brand new Xbox, and I'm sorry, I don't know the newest version, but somebody offers you an Xbox and at $50. It's the newest version, and everything is pristine. It's in the original packaging. Everything about it is perfect. Okay, let's face it. The Xbox is not $50. It's worth a whole lot more than that. And if you buy that, then you pretty much know that it's probably been stolen because of the circumstances. Therefore, that knowledge that the property is stolen may be implied by the circumstances. There's no way, in most cases, now there are exceptions, but boy, you'd have to approve it to that, but there's usually no way that that property was anything but stolen. So you have to understand, so if you receive or buy that knowing that it's stolen, then you are guilty of a crime. Okay? You are guilty. You may not have stolen it, but you are guilty of the crime having received that property. All right. Now, unauthorized use of a vehicle. There are two types. Drug riding, which is temporary use, which is illegal. Taking your parents' car when they didn't tell you you could, and going out and grabbing some friends and riding around, and then bringing it back, can get you in trouble. Now, They may not, your parents may not call the cops, but if they do, you can be charged with joyriding. And of course, that's true with anybody's car. If you take a friend's car, you decide you want to go and you are at a party and they've run out of chips, and you decide you want to get some more chips, and so you take your friend's key and take their car without their knowing, that's joyriding, and you can get into serious trouble if they decide to press charges. So don't do it. Also, carjacking, and this is if a person uses force or intimidation to steal a car from a driver. This is a federal crime, so a federal issue. Of course, we've heard sad stories where somebody has been carjacked and an adult is pulled from the car, and the person stealing the car jumps in, and unbeknownst to them, there's a child in the back of the car. And off they go. And what a horrifying set of circumstances. So carjacking is considered a federal crime. Now, computer crime is, according to your book, it's a little bit outdated. So I went ahead and did a couple things with that. And we'll use what I've gotten here as what you need to know for computer crime. So computer crime describes a very broad category of offenses. Some of them are the same as non-computer offenses, such as larceny and fraud, except that a computer or the internet is used in the commission of the crime. Others, like hacking, are uniquely related to computers, and that is a separate crime. Okay. Now, computer crime is something that we all can be potential victims of. Computer crime has become an enormous issue for the legal, for the law, for the courts. And so we need to be thinking about what we're talking about to clarify what is computer crime. And so computer crime laws prohibit a person from performing certain acts without authorization. So I've made a list here that you need to note in your notes. Number one, improperly accessing a computer system or network. There, of course, we've all heard of people who have hacked or have attempted to hack into the school's computers, and they have gotten into some serious trouble. This is not acceptable. Two, modifying, damaging, using, disclosing, copying, or taking programs or data that's not your own. Three, introducing a virus or other contaminant into a computer system. Four, using a computer in a scheme to defraud. Five, interfering with someone else's computer access or use. Six, using encryption in aid of a crime. Seven, falsifying email source information. And eight, stealing an information service from a provider. I think we all are fully aware of some of the different computer crimes out there. There's so many today that it's almost impossible to talk about. I have a friend who has a IT business, and he talks about all the different crime that he's experienced or has tried to help people with because of leaving their computer systems open to the possibility of crime. So pay close attention to your computers. Think seriously about using Wi-Fi that is not protected. And what you do. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing to use Wi-Fi that's not protected. Just make sure you don't use programs that will make you a victim of crime. Okay, so protect yourself. Losing a computer or a web account due to cybercrime can be very damaging, especially as we continue to rely more and more on those networks to conduct business. Okay. There are, however, certain things you can do to help yourself. First, much of cybercrime is fraud involving the use of a computer. Learn the warning signs of fraudulent behavior and wire fraud. Be extremely careful when giving out sensitive personal information, such as social security numbers and bank account access codes over the internet. Otherwise, take basic precautions for keeping your data private. Use passwords that are difficult to hack and change them frequently. Don't conduct financial transactions on public computers or over unprotected networks. You should also install a good antivirus program on your computer and keep it updated. Finally, be careful about downloading software from disreputable websites, as it can contain spyware, viruses, or other malware. Very important and good advice. This comes from Computer Crime at FindLaw. All right, computer crime, social network, cybercrime, and internet sex crimes. While bullying, sexual harassment, and child pornography are long-standing crimes and societal problems, the internet and social network sites have introduced a whole new area for predators to practice their trade. Cyberbullying. This is an issue that school has to deal with on times, ridiculous amount of foolishness by people. Cyberbullying is an aggressive harassment that occurs using electronic technology, including cell phones, tablets, and computers, using social media sites and chat sites. Cyberbullying includes the sending of unwanted abusive text messages, photographs, personal information, defamatory and libelous allegations and rumors, and the creation of fake profiles intended to harm victims. Guys, please, this is ridiculous. Have the good sense to, if somebody begins to do this, tell. If you are a victim of this, tell. Do not let people get away with this. This is when it's not okay. You must be willing to tell. Hate crimes are the most heinous of various cyberbullying crimes, and they carry their own distinct set of penalties in most states, including additional jail time and sometimes mandatory prison time if connected to another felony. Hate crimes also pique the interest of FBI, who prosecutes hate crimes and maintains statistics on proliferation of hate crimes and other forms of civilian terrorism. You hear that? This is a form of terrorism. Doing things to cause this much problems, this much harm, is terrorism. And you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. And you can't take that back. And you shouldn't be a victim of that. You need to tell if this sort of thing happens to you. All right, so that is the end of this chapter 10. Once you have finished with your notes, make sure that you upload both chapter 9 and 10. There are separate uploads for them. Make sure you upload individually, these notes individually. Okay. This assignment is for week 2.